Today, it stands as the pulsing jugular vein of the global economy, a relentless river of steel and heavy crude. Every single day, colossal leviathans carve through these dark waters, carrying the absolute lifeblood of the modern world through a treacherous, impossibly narrow corridor. This is the Strait of Hormuz, a geographical chokepoint where a mere 39 kilometers of salt water separates global prosperity from total economic collapse. Yet far beneath the churning bronze propellers of these modern supertankers, hidden in the crushing depths, lies a vast graveyard of forgotten human ambitions. To truly understand the gravity of these unforgiving waters, we must leave the modern age of oil behind. We must strip away the steel, silence the engines, and descend into the dark abyss of time, returning to an era where the sea was a realm of pure terror. Long before the world craved the black gold buried beneath the desert sands, men bled for a very different kind of treasure. 2.5 millennia ago, this dark, crushing underwater silence was the exclusive, terrifying domain of the ancient Persian pearl diver. Driven by the insatiable demands of distant kings and wealthy merchants, these men plunged headfirst into the crushing unknown, risking everything for a handful of shimmering spheres. And remarkably, for over 2,000 years, this perilous, lung-bursting dance with the ocean did not change a single step. What you are witnessing here is not ancient history, but raw archival footage from the early 20th century. Yet, it serves as a perfect, haunting mirror to the distant past. It is the exact same bone clip pinching the nose, the exact same heavy stone weight, the exact same desperate, agonizing gasp for air. They challenge the merciless depths armed with absolutely nothing, the fragile biological limits of the human lung. In this unforgiving environment, the immense wealth of sprawling empires was measured not in millions of barrels of oil, but in the frantic, fleeting heartbeats of desperate men. It was a deadly lottery played out beneath the waves, day after blistering day. But the true story of this grand maritime gateway begins even further back in the mists of time. 3,000 years before the birth of Christ, on the sun-baked, salt-crusted shores of ancient Elam, in a harsh world entirely devoid of magnetic compasses or nautical maps, human audacity took its very first trembling steps into the open ocean. Using tightly bound reeds and thick, boiling black bitumen, they engineered the first vessels capable of defying the sea. These early sailors were the true pioneers of the deep. Leaving the shallow safety of the coastline, they sailed directly from the ancient cradle of civilization into the gaping, unpredictable maw of the Indian Ocean. Every voyage was a massive leap of faith, trusting primitive, woven sails to carry them across waters that had never before felt the touch of a human hull. Their heavy cargo was nothing less than the foundational bedrock of the Bronze Age itself. They transported raw, unrefined copper dragged from the jagged mountains of Magan, alongside brilliant, celestial lapis lazuli, destined to adorn the great, towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia. Hormuz was never just a simple geographic passage. It was the world's very first true artery of international, intercontinental trade. For these courageous early mariners, the open ocean was a terrifying, infinite void of black water. They had no mechanical instruments to tell them where they were. Their only reliable guides in this liquid desert were the rhythmic breathing cycles of the coastal tides, and the cold, unblinking map of the Milky Way stretching across the desert sky. They read the heavens to survive the earth, but the ancient gods who ruled this sea were notoriously fickle and fiercely unforgiving. The monsoon winds, which served as the great invisible engine of ancient commerce, could turn from a gentle blessing into an absolute violent nightmare in a matter of hours. The sky would bruise purple, The winds would howl with demonic fury, and the water would rise like dark mountains. Thousands of souls simply vanished in these turbulent, boiling waters, their fragile wooden ships swallowed whole by the abyss. The Strait of Hormuz was a merciless, watery toll booth on the highway of human progress. It demanded absolute courage from those who dared to cross it, and all too frequently, it demanded their lives as payment in full. By the 6th century BC, these wild, untamed waters had finally been claimed by an organized power. The mighty Achaemenid Empire of Persia understood a fundamental, undeniable geopolitical truth. Whoever commands the strait commands the infinite wealth of the East. From high atop these jagged coastal cliffs, heavily armored Persian sentinels stood watch over a sprawling empire that stretched uninterrupted from the borders of India all the way to the sands of Egypt. Under the strict protection of Persian rule, the once desolate shores of Hormuz rapidly transformed into a vibrant, chaotic, and incredibly wealthy nexus. It became a sprawling, multicultural bazaar where the dry dust of the Arabian desert finally met the heavy salt of the sea. Here, merchants from a dozen different nations traded spices, silks, and slaves under the punishing Middle Eastern sun. Yet, at the very beating heart of this booming coastal economy was the dangerous harvest of the deep. A single, flawless, luminous pearl plucked from the perilous seabed of Hormuz was often worth more than an entire merchant ship and its crew combined. It was the ultimate prize of the ancient world, traded in hushed tones in the shadowy corners of the bustling market. These magnificent pearls were the ultimate, undeniable symbol of absolute power. They were carried thousands of miles inland to the magnificent palaces of Persepolis, paid as direct tribute to Darius the Great himself. It was a glowing, iridescent testament to an empire's complete dominion over both the land and the treacherous ocean. This was a concentration of wealth so legendary, so culturally significant, that it was permanently etched into the very bones of the Persian Empire. Here, carved into the ancient limestone walls of Persepolis, the silent ghosts of those ancient merchants still carry their heavy tribute to the king. They are forever frozen in stone, marching endlessly through the millennia, immune to the passage of time. But as history dictates, no empire lasts forever. In the year 325 BC, a brilliant, terrifying new conqueror cast his long shadow over the Eastern world. Alexander the Great, having violently pushed his exhausted army to the very edges of the known world, became deeply obsessed with the vast, uncharted, mysterious waters that bordered the southern edge of his newly conquered domain. Alexander entrusted this terrifying, unprecedented mission to his absolute finest naval commander, Admiral Nikos. The young king's orders were simple in concept, but seemingly impossible in execution. Take command of a massive Greek fleet, sail them out from the muddy rivers of conquered India, navigate through the monstrous, uncharted ocean, and somehow find the maritime way back home to Babylon. As the massive fleet of wooden triremes finally left the muddy, familiar safety of the Indus River, they crossed a psychological threshold into a dark, profoundly alien world. For the ancient Greeks, the Indian Ocean was not a lucrative trade route. It was a terrifying, mythological wasteland. It was the edge of the flat earth, a cursed domain believed by every sailor to be infested with giant leviathans and world-ending sea monsters. Down in the stifling, claustrophobic heat of the lower wooden decks, blind fear was far more contagious than any physical disease. With every stroke of the heavy oars, paranoia grew. To these sweating men, Every dark shadow moving in the water was a beast waiting to strike. Every rogue wave was the undeniable wrath of Poseidon himself. They were sailing entirely blind, rowing directly into the gaping mouth of madness. And then, after weeks of psychological torture and battling the merciless elements, out of the thick, grey morning fog, the jagged jaws of the earth suddenly appeared. The towering, black, volcanic daggers of the Musandam Peninsula pierced the sky like broken teeth. Nikos had done the impossible. He had found the great, legendary gateway. He had discovered the most important strategic choke point of the ancient world. As the massive fleet of wooden triremes finally left the muddy, familiar safety of the Indus River, they crossed a psychological threshold into a dark, profoundly alien world. For the ancient Greeks, the Indian Ocean was not a lucrative trade route. It was a terrifying mythological wasteland. It was the edge of the flat earth, a cursed domain believed by every sailor to be infested with giant leviathans and world-ending sea monsters. In doing so, he permanently bridged the great divide between the East and the West. While his original fragile logs were ultimately lost to the unforgiving sea of time, his detailed accounts survived through the ages, carefully copied into illuminated manuscripts just like these. The ancient world had finally unlocked the door and placed the Strait of Hormuz firmly on the map of human ambition. But in the violent centuries to come, the global, bloody battle to truly own that door was only just beginning.